Everything you've been told about death is a lie. It is not an end, not a void, not a mystery left to faith or speculation. Death is a doorway, an entry into something far more profound than anyone has ever dared to understand. For over 1,000 years, there has existed a manuscript, a forbidden text that was once known only to the most enlightened minds. It does not speak of heaven or hell, nor does it comfort the dying with illusions of rest. Instead, it reveals the truth. The moment of death is not the final breath. It is the beginning of a test that determines whether you break free from the endless cycle of birth and rebirth, or whether you remain trapped, blind and unprepared in a reality you do not understand. Most people fail, not because they are weak, but because they do not know they are being tested. They do not recognize the illusion. They do not see the trap. They do not realize that everything they feel, see, and hear after death is a projection of their own mind. And by the time they do, it is too late. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, an ancient text hidden for centuries, describes in precise detail what happens in the first 49 days after death. It is a roadmap for the soul, a guide through the most important journey it will ever take. And if the text is true, then the first moments after death are more significant than the entire life you have just lived. Everything you have ever known, everything you have ever believed, is about to be tested. It all begins the moment you leave your body behind. Reality does not stop. You do not simply disappear. Instead, something else takes over, something older than time itself. You will feel weightless, detached, as if waking from a dream. There will be no heartbeat, no breath, no physical sensation, and yet you will still be aware. If you have ever had an out-of-body experience, the sensation will feel eerily familiar, except this time, there is no coming back. And then it happens. A blinding, radiant light, so powerful, so overwhelming, that your very existence seems to dissolve into it. This is what the Tibetan Book of the Dead calls the clear light of reality. It is the ultimate moment of liberation. If you recognize it, if you surrender to it completely, you will merge with it. You will transcend the cycle of birth and death, achieving instant enlightenment. You will escape reincarnation forever, but almost no one does. Fear takes over. The mind clings to its identity, its memories, its unfinished desires. Instead of embracing the light, the soul recoils, unable to let go of the self it once was. And in that instant, the illusions begin. You will hear sound, whispers, echoes of voices that seem familiar but distorted, as if calling to you from behind the veil. The world around you will shift. The radiant light will fade, replaced by shadows and shifting patterns. You will see glimpses of people you once knew, places that feel eerily recognizable, but none of it is real. Not yet. Your mind is grasping, searching for meaning, and in doing so, it begins to create. Every thought, every emotion begins to manifest as reality. This is where most souls lose their way. Instead of recognizing death as an opportunity for liberation, they fall into confusion. They seek comfort in familiarity, and the mind obliges, recreating the world they once knew. Some even see religious figures they worshipped in life, not realizing that these too are merely manifestations of their own subconscious beliefs. If they understood the truth, that none of it is real, they could let go. But they don't. Instead, they follow these illusions deeper into the bardo, the intermediate state between death and rebirth. The first few moments after death are the most crucial. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that awareness is the key, that those who are prepared for this moment can pass through the illusions and break free. But for the unprepared, for those who still cling to their past lives, what comes next is unavoidable. They will move through the 49-day journey, experiencing visions that will either guide them toward enlightenment or trap them in yet another cycle of reincarnation. At first, there is only confusion. The soul lingers, trying to return home, trying to speak to loved ones, trying to be seen. It does not yet realize that it has died. It drifts through familiar places, watching as life continues without it. It tries to make contact, but no one responds. No one hears. And then, slowly, the realization begins to sink in. This is not a dream. This is death. Even then, the mind resists. It clings to its identity, searching for logic, for explanations, for anything familiar to hold on to. But the bardo does not provide comfort. It is not a place of rest. It is a place of transition, where the soul must confront itself in its purest form. At first, the experience is peaceful. There is no physical pain, no suffering, only awareness. Some describe it as floating through a vast, open space, a formless void where thoughts ripple outward like waves in an infinite ocean. But then, slowly, visions begin to emerge. Beautiful, radiant beings appear. They emanate warmth, wisdom, and overwhelming sense of peace. They do not speak, yet their presence fills the soul with a deep knowing. Some who have had near-death experiences describe them as angels, as enlightened masters, as gods, but they are none of these things. They are reflections of the soul's own higher consciousness, appearing in a form that can understand. If the soul recognizes them for what they are, it can merge with them, dissolving into higher awareness and escaping the cycle of reincarnation forever. But most don't. They hesitate. They doubt. And hesitation is all it takes. The radiant beings fade. In their place, shadows emerge. The peaceful figures begin to distort, their once gentle faces twisting into grotesque expressions. The voices, once soothing, become whispers of doubt and fear. The paradise begins to shift into something darker. Then the terror begins. Dark figures appear, monstrous, inhuman. They roar with voices that shake the very fabric of the bardo. They are demons, executioners, relentless pursuers. They chase the soul, taunted, drag it deeper into fear. And the more the soul panics, the more powerful they become. But here is the truth that almost no one understands. These monsters are not real. They are not external beings. They are not punishments. They are projections of the soul's own unresolved fears, its guilt, its buried regrets. Every deception, every cruelty, every moment of selfishness from the past life now takes form in the bardo, appearing as something external, something attacking. But the attack is self-created. The horror is self-inflicted. And the more the soul fights, the stronger the visions become. There is only one way to escape. Not to run, not to fight, to recognize. The moment the soul understands that these beings are nothing more than shadows of the mind, they vanish instantly, like mist burned away by the morning sun. But almost no one understands this in time. They see only the nightmare, not the lesson hidden within it, and so they fall deeper. By the third or fourth week, the illusions take a new form. The wrathful visions fade, and in their place, something even more profound begins. The soul is no longer running. Instead, it is pulled backward, back through time, through every action, every thought, every emotion it ever created. But this is not memory. This is reliving. The soul does not just recall its past life. It experiences it. Every moment of kindness, every act of cruelty, felt not just from its own perspective, but from the perspective of everyone it ever affected. If you caused pain, you will feel that pain. If you brought joy, you will feel that joy. There is no filter, no justifications, no excuses, only raw, undeniable truth. And then the cycle begins again, unless you wake up, unless you remember the truth, unless you break free, because the bardo is waiting, and the journey through the realm between worlds is only just beginning. The reckoning is here, and it is unavoidable. But here's where things become even more shocking. According to ancient Tibetan teachings, the moment of death is not the end. It is only the beginning. What follows is a profound and inescapable confrontation with everything you have ever been. The life review is not just a replay of the past. It is something far more powerful, something that determines the very course of your future. Every action, every thought, every emotion you have ever experienced is brought back to life, not as a distant memory, but as something immediate and visceral. You do not just recall your joys and sorrows, you relive them. And by the time the soul has relived its entire existence, something irreversible has happened. It is no longer neutral. It has been deeply conditioned by the emotions it has just experienced. If the soul emerges from this review burdened by guilt, regret, or attachment, it does not simply move on. It is drawn back into the cycle of reincarnation. The weight of one's unresolved emotions, the lingering grip of earthly attachments, becomes an invisible force, pulling the soul into another life. The heavier the burden, the lower the realm it is destined for. Some are reborn into suffering, into poverty, into struggle, not because of divine punishment, not because of external judgment, but because their own mind state drags them there. The soul is choosing without even realizing it. This is why the life review is not just a reflection, it is a test to see if the soul can let go, if it can accept its past without attachment, if it can release the burden of regret, fear, and unfulfilled desires. Those who can move toward liberation. Those who cannot return once more into another body, another existence, another cycle of struggle. This is why spiritual traditions have always emphasized preparing for death long before it arrives. Because when the moment comes, when the great mirror is placed before you, what you see is no longer within your control. The story has already been written, shaped by the choices of the life you live. By the fourth or fifth week in the bardo, the final test begins. The soul, now having relived its past, faces its ultimate choice: break free forever, or fall back into the cycle of reincarnation. But here is the terrifying part. Most souls don't even realize they are making a choice. By this point, the illusions of the bardo have become so overwhelming, so utterly convincing, that the soul barely remembers is in the in-between state at all. The visions change. The terrifying deities and fragmented hallucinations of earlier stages fade away. Now, the illusions take on a new form, one that is far more seductive. They become familiar, comforting, nostalgic. The Tibetan Book of the Dead warns that in these final days, the soul will be offered a way out, but it is a trap. It sees visions of loved ones calling it back, familiar places appearing in the distance, drawing it in with warmth and longing. The soul begins to feel an overwhelming pull, a deep desire to return, and it does not realize that these are not just hallucinations. These are glimpses of the next life, the one it is about to enter. The karmic forces have already begun shaping the conditions of the soul's return, weaving the circumstances of the next incarnation. And if the soul clings to these visions, if it allows itself to be pulled in, it happens instantly. Rebirth, another body, another life, another cycle of forgetting. The process is automatic, mercilessly efficient. The moment the soul latches onto a desire, a fear, an attachment, it is swept away, pulled into a new room, a new existence, and in an instant, all memory of this moment is erased. The Book of the Dead describes this as a state of deep unconsciousness, a moment of absolute forgetting where the past dissolves and a new self emerges. It is as if waking from a dream with no recollection of what came before. And so, the cycle begins again. Birth, suffering, death, and another return to the bardo. But for the few who are prepared, for the rare souls who have trained their minds to see through the illusion, the final test is different. They do not cling to these comforting visions. They do not allow themselves to be pulled in by the longing for what once was. Instead, they remain still. They see the illusions for what they are, mere projections of their own mind, designed to keep them trapped. They do not react. They do not run. They do not grasp. And in that moment, something incredible happens. The illusions collapse. The karmic forces lose their grip. The pull toward rebirth fades. And the soul, free from attachment, free from fear, transcends the cycle completely. This is what the Tibetan masters call liberation. But it is not a place. It is not a heaven. It is not an afterlife in the way most people think of it. It is something far more profound, a state beyond illusion, beyond duality, beyond suffering. But almost no one reaches this state, because to do so requires something that most people never prepare for: awareness at the moment of death, the ability to recognize the trap before it closes. For over 1,000 years, these teachings were hidden, locked away, reserved only for the most advanced spiritual practitioners, censored by religious institutions. Even today, most people have never heard of them, and there is a reason for that. Because if people truly understood what happens after death, it would change everything. It would shatter the very foundation of society's most deeply held beliefs. Think about it. If death is not an end, if it is not a punishment, if there is no divine judgment deciding your fate, then what happens to the power structures that have been built on these very ideas? Religions would crumble, governments would lose their grip, societies would unravel. For centuries, religious institutions have preached about heaven and hell, about divine punishment, about the necessity of obeying higher authorities in order to secure a place in the afterlife. These narratives serve one purpose: control. If people believe that an external force dictates their fate after death, they will follow. They will conform. They will fear. But what if the truth is that no one is judging you but yourself? What if the afterlife is not about punishment or reward, but simply your own mind reflecting back at you? This knowledge was kept hidden because it destroys the illusion that salvation comes from an external source. It forces people to accept something far more terrifying: that they are fully responsible for their own fate. For centuries, this knowledge was dismissed as superstition. But now, something incredible is happening. Modern science is beginning to confirm aspects of these ancient teachings. Near-death experiences, or NDEs, are filled with eerily similar descriptions. People report seeing the clear light, encountering a life review, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace or fear, depending on their actions in life. Even cutting-edge quantum physics is starting to suggest that consciousness is not confined to the brain, that it may persist beyond death, that it may operate outside the limits of time and space. And yet, despite all of this, most people remain completely unprepared. Society is designed to keep people distracted, focused on the material world, chasing money, status, validation, so that by the time death arrives, they are completely unaware of what is happening. And when the moment comes, they are lost, unprepared, pulled back into the cycle once more. The biggest lie ever told about death is that it is a mystery. It is not. The Tibetan masters mapped it out over 1,000 years ago. They understood that the first 49 days after death follow a precise structure, that the mind shapes its own afterlife. That awareness is the only key to freedom. And yet, almost no one is preparing for it. Because the real secret is this: if you are not conscious in life, you will not be conscious in death. Most will move on from this knowledge. They will forget. They will return to their routines, to their distractions, to their programmed existence. And when the moment comes, they will be as lost as the billions before them, blinded, confused, caught in the same trap. But for the few who understand, for those who wake up now, everything changes, because preparation does not happen after death. It happens while you are still here. And the question is no longer what happens after death. The real question is, are we already dead?